My name doesn't matter anymore. Back in Al-Manzura, they even took that away from me. They called me Is, because those were the only letters scrawled in white chalk on my phone. Sometimes I wonder if those initials were placed there by accident, or if it was somehow an angel disguised as a guardian trying to leave me a clue. But at that moment, I wasn't looking for signs. I just wanted to survive. I was surviving hunger, the bitter cold, even when the temperature dropped to 40 degrees outside. I was trying to survive the desperate screams of other prisoners who could no longer make a sound. I was trying to survive myself. I was a soldier, just like so many others. Not because I believed in a cause, not because I was patriotic. I was there out of fear, for the pay, for the promise of a bed to sleep and a hot meal on my plate. I was trained to obey, not to question, to follow orders, not to think. I played my part until the day I was ordered to shoot a young man who was coming towards us with his arms open, shouting, "They won't kill me. They'll kill me tomorrow," he said. I didn't know him. I didn't know if he was guilty of anything. I only knew that he didn't have a gun. When I decided to lower my gun, an older officer spat in my face and shouted that I was worse than the enemy. That's when my name was lost. From that moment on, I was just myself, nothing else. At first, I thought they would release me after weeks. Then I thought they would execute me right away. But they chose a more cruel punishment, the torture of routine. No breakfast, no set hours for the day, meaningless interrogations, repeated insults like mantras. Coward, traitor, apostate. They didn't even know what I believed, and that didn't matter to them. The enemy needs no proof, only excuse. One night, in the middle of a shouted call, a new guard dropped something under my door. I didn't move until his shadow was. I picked up the paper, thinking it was trash, but it wasn't. It was a crumpled sheet of paper, wet at the edges, smelling musty, as if it had been hidden for days, maybe inside someone's shoe. I opened the paper with trembling hands. It said, Enil Yuhana, chapter 15, and right below it was a sentence that struck me in the chest. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. I read it over and over again and over again, there in the dark, my heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't understand why it made me cry, but I did. I didn't cry in defeat. I cried like someone who finds themselves again. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I recited that verse so many times that it seemed to enter me, becoming part of my body. Each word rebuilt me from the inside, as if every pain, every broken piece of me was aligning with that message. I, who had never believed in anything, found there a reason to keep living, to not die inside. In the days that followed, my cell was no longer the same. The walls were still gray, but I saw them with different eyes. Each crack seemed to tell a story, each distant sound, a sign. One day, while sweeping the floor, I noticed that someone had written a single letter in charcoal on the rust on the bed. I had no idea what it meant, but something inside me said, "Pay attention." It was as if that word had awakened an invisible antenna inside my chest. The weeks passed. I began to repeat the verse in my head, in various forms. I translated it into sounds, symbols, even codes that only I understood. I had no paper or pen, but my mind became an infinite blackboard. I promised myself that if I ever left that place, that sentence wouldn't stay with me alone. It couldn't be a secret kept under lock and key. If that sheet of paper had pulled me out of the abyss, maybe it could be a light for someone who was in the dark. The escape? It's never something that's planned properly. It was a mess. Screams, the sound of locks breaking, doors flying, a blackout in the middle of the chaos. It was a poorly executed rebellion, but still a chance. I don't even know how I managed to get out. I ran with numb legs, dodging fallen bodies and clouds of dust. I jumped fences, hurt my feet, but I had no clear direction, only a strong desire to survive. Only this time, with a real purpose. I spent weeks hiding in drainage ditches, sleeping during the day and walking it. I picked up scraps of food, talked to myself so I wouldn't go crazy. In my haste, I lost the paper with the verse from the gospel, but it was already tattooed on my soul. Every night, before closing my eyes, I would repeat those words, sometimes in Arabic, sometimes in English, and I even tried in Russian. It made no sense. I just felt that I needed to carry them in all languages. When I arrived at a market in Hadibu, a tall, thick-bearded man gave me a piece of bread, without asking for anything in return. He saw my bruises and pointed to a church that had been destroyed by bombing. "There's no roof there and there's shade," he said. I began to sleep among the rubble, under the broken stained glass window. And that night, I dreamed of fire. Not the kind of fire that burns and destroys, but the kind of fire that purifies, that cleanses the heart. When I woke up, I understood. I needed to leave a mark. Surviving wasn't enough. I had to spread that verse, multiply that light. I began to hide my message in text files. Then, inside photos, sand, palm tree, rocks. No one would suspect. It was a secret that was only mine, and that of whoever found the right file. Until one day, someone replied. The message was simple. I, too, was saved by these words. It came from Diridagwa, signed with only 2 letters. I-N. I don't know if it was real or if it was a dream, but it didn't matter. I was no longer alone. As long as there is someone locked up, searching for meaning behind bars, I will keep writing. Even if I have no name, even if I am alone again, I will live, because someone gave their life for me, and I want it to be worth it. I have become a shadow with purpose. I have learned to move unnoticed in the noisy streets, as if the world has forgotten I exist. But I have not forgotten. My memory is my temple, my shelter, my armor, and of all the words I carried with me, only one beats strongly inside my chest. Love. Not the kind of love from a soap opera or a song, but the love that bleeds, that waits, that doesn't give up. Once, on a fishing beach, I found an old, broken cell phone, rusted by the salt. It barely worked, but it could save messages. I wiped it with my sleeve and wrote the verse again, like a ritual, like a promise I wouldn't break. That afternoon, I gave my cell phone to the boy who was begging on the street. His eyes held the same fear I felt. He said just one thing. When you learn to read, look for this. It's a treasure. I don't know if he understood, but he smiled. And for me, that was enough. I spent months in cities whose names I no longer remember. They called me Ali, Samir, Nabil, a different name on every corner. But I only responded when someone called me brother, because then I knew I was no longer a number, an acronym, a shadow. I was part of something bigger, an invisible network of people who had been broken, but not destroyed. People who had known darkness, and yet decided to light a spark anyway. I began to teach what I knew, but not in classrooms. It was in dusty cafes, on benches in destroyed squares, on cement rooftops where Wi-Fi reached quickly. I showed how to hide messages, how to survive with dignity, how to find signs where others only saw rubble. But most importantly, I taught the value of that phrase. Because when everything is ripped away from you, what's left in your heart is what really matters. One night, sleeping in an old shoemaker's house in Nouakchott, I had a nightmare. I dreamed that I was returning to Al Mansoura, that I was being dragged back to that voiceless cell. But when I entered, it was not empty. On the wall, someone had written the verse, and in white chalk the letters glowed, illuminated by a sliver of light. I woke up soaked, shaking, but smiling, because I understood. Prison was not only my enemy, it was my origin. Today I live under a false name, but the fire that burns within me is real. That fire that purified me, that opened my eyes, that made me a witness. Sometimes I wonder if someone in that damp, guilt-ridden cell is finding the same paper that saved me. Maybe, maybe not. But if they do, let them know they are not alone, because I am still here, hidden, but alive in every word I encrypted files. In every child I pass a coded text to. In every night I repeat that verse like a rebellious prayer. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. And even if the world has forgotten me, I will not stop giving. Even if all I have left is a borrowed keyboard, a shadow as shelter, and a phrase tattooed on my soul. This phrase rebuilt me, and now it is my flag. If they catch me again, if they erase my name again, if I go back to being just an acronym, know this. You don't arrest someone who has already been freed by the truth. Those who have had their soul freed cannot be imprisoned, because when the heart finds meaning, neither bars, nor threats, nor the densest silence can silence it. After Semtiro, I crossed unsealed borders. I walked paths that were not on maps. I was guided by rumors, by knowing glances, by small signs that would go unnoticed by others. But for me, they were beacons. A handkerchief tied to a branch, a stone placed in a strange way, simple gestures carrying enormous messages. I learned to read the world as if it were an open code, as if God had given me a manual to decipher his voice in a little thing. In Addis Ababa, I met a woman who healed with herbs and words. She didn't ask my name, she just offered me water and silence. One night he saw me reciting that verse under a tin roof. He heard my voice, a little shaky, like someone trying to remember who they really were. When I finished, he came over and said, "This isn't just a verse, it's a seed. You have to plant it." Since then, wherever I go, I leave a piece of this seed hidden. Sometimes it's a USB stick buried near a tree. Other times, it's a QR code discreetly painted on the back of an old sign, or a lost sentence in a book forgotten at a train station. I'm not sure if anyone will find it, but I don't live on certainties. I live on hope. I have become something I never imagined, an invisible sower, not of politics, nor of ideologies, but of words that burn, of hope encoded amidst the noise of because the whisper of truth can echo louder than any scream. I don't know if I'll ever have a real name again, the kind that appears on passports and documents, but every time someone reads that verse and something moves inside them, I feel like I exist again, that I breathe together with. Once, back in rural Tanzania, I saw a group of kids gathered around a broken tablet. They were playing an app someone had lent them, and on the screen, amidst vibrant colors and cartoons, my code appeared. It lasted only a second. The image of a broken loaf of bread. If you touched it, a message would appear. The children didn't understand everything. They were too young, but one of them, the quietest, whispered, who would give their life for. No one answered, but I cried inside, because the message had arrived. My body bears marks, scars on my back that you can't see, but that sometimes burn like a newly lit fire. I don't try to hide them. They are part of who I am. My voice changed too. It became slower, deeper, as if each word had to escape through a crack before reaching the. And my faith is no longer just an idea. It is a living flame that accompanies me, even when I don't understand where it takes me. If one day they arrest me again, if they interrogate me, if they try to erase me, they won't succeed. They won't find all the hidden messages, because not all of them are on the internet. Some are in the gaze that meets, in the hand that reaches out, in the small acts of radical love. That's where the gospel lives. I didn't convert out of fear. I converted because that phrase became a home. Since then, all I've done is open doors for others to find that home, even if they don't see me, even if they don't know who I was. And because someone gave his life for me, I'm still here. Not just breathing, I'm alive, sowing light where everything seemed broken. And even if the world never speaks my full name again, I know it is written in another book, a book that can never be destroyed, a book that torture and time cannot erase, an eternal book, which I don't know how to describe. I've never seen it with my own eyes, but I've felt its presence, as if it were written on a different plane, not on paper, nor in the clouds, but inside my soul. It was one night, when I had to decide whether to continue on my way, or help a wounded man, that I truly understood this. He was lying bleeding beside an abandoned railway line, shaking with fever. I knew I had to keep going. Someone was waiting for me on the other side of the border, but I stopped. I gave him water, covered his wound with my shirt, and prayed, not with memorized words, but with the only comfort I knew, the verse. He tried to repeat after me, in a weak voice, almost a whisper. I heard this before, when my daughter died. I don't know if she survived, but I know that on that night, if someone opened that heavenly book, our initials would be side by side, not because we were saints, but because we chose to love when the easiest thing to do was to run away. Today, I walk carefully. I am no longer a fugitive. I am a messenger. Even when I am persecuted, even when I change my face or use names that are not mine, I carry something that no one can take away, my mission. Sometimes my whole body trembles. I wake up thinking I've returned to Al-Mansura, that the walls are closing, that I'm short of air. But then I put my hand on my chest and feel a pulse that isn't just mine. It's as if every person who read that verse is giving me the strength to carry on. Recently, in an internet cafe, I opened a pixelated image of a flower with a strange flaw. I recognized it immediately. It was mine. In the metadata, a discrete message, verse received. Now we are through. He said nothing more, but I looked at that screen, cracked like a stained glass window, and I cried, not from pain, but from certainty. The network was forming, silent, invisible, unbeatable. The few who know me ask me if I'm not afraid. Of course I am. I'm not made of iron, but there is something greater than fear. The urgency to reach those who have not yet heard this message. Because if I don't take it to them, maybe no one. I have no church, no temple, no flag. My altar is every corner where someone needs comfort. My prayer is the codes hidden between the lines. My community is invisible, formed by those who, without knowing each other, share the same phrase like a sacred fire. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. This is my cross, and my crown. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. I don't know if they'll arrest me tomorrow. But if anyone finds this testimony, in a picture, in a distorted audio, in a line of code that seems out of place, let them know. We do not fight with weapons, we fight with truth. We do not raise flags, we leave seeds. We do not shout from the trenches, we whisper from the silence. And that whisper, when joined with others, can tear down any wall. I am IH. As long as my fingers can type, I will continue to sow light where everything is hidden. Because, even without a name, I have a purpose. And that, brother, no one can erase. Purpose is like an underground river, invisible, but unstoppable. We don't always see it, we don't always hear its voice, but if we pay attention, we can feel it. There's something running beneath our feet, an invisible river, and this river takes me, sometimes away from everything, sometimes straight to the right place, at the right time. I passed through Damascus disguised as a merchant, through Khartoum pretending to be a laborer. In Istanbul, I cleaned windows of buildings so tall they seemed to be talking to the sky. No one noticed me, and that was my greatest advantage. Even invisible, I continued to leave traces. A code hidden in a cell phone, a scrambled sentence in the margins of some technical. Each step was a letter without a sender, a timed bomb of hope. It would not explode with fire, with faith. One night, in a very expensive guest house that took me in by mistake or miracle, I met a young man who talked in his sleep. He mumbled names, parts of sentences, and, in an almost silent moment, he whispered through his tears, but no one gave their life for me. My chest froze. I knew that despair, that wound. At dawn, I left him a piece of paper. No signature, no explanation, just a verse. John 15:13. I left before he woke up. I don't know if he read it, but that morning when I walked through the door, I felt whole. I didn't come to preach. I've never been good at sermon. I came to bear witness, to let my story speak, to show that there is no cell, no system, capable of suffocating a truth that was planted with love. Every scar I carry is a piece of every silence, a holy pause, and every person who stops, even for a moment, to listen to what is behind that phrase, is already part of the plan, not of the generals, not of the war chiefs, but of the one who gave his own life without raising a weapon. At some point, someone found me. I don't know how or who sent them. They offered me documents, a new identity, a passport, a chance to return to normal, but I didn't accept, because the man I was died in Al-Mansura. What's left of me now doesn't live to run away. It lives to plant, live to build something without headquarters, without fences, without bosses, a network of echoes. The sound of a single sentence, so simple that it scares. Because when someone truly understands that there is a love capable of dying for another, everything changes. Excuses fall away, masks break, and the only revolution worth it begins, that of the spirit, the one that doesn't need noise to make itself heard. I keep walking, sometimes without direction, sometimes pulled by a breath that I don't know where it comes from, but always with that verse throbbing in my chest, as if each heartbeat said, "Greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend." And if one day my body falls apart, if the last scene of my life is that of a stranger collapsing on a random street, know this: it was not in vain, because even the fall can be a seed, because even in the dust there can be a hidden code, and someone, somewhere in the world, will find it. And when I find it, I'll be there, between the lines, in the pixels, in an act of love that no one saw, but God saw. Even if my face disappears, even if my voice is lost in time, then it wasn't just a name erased. It was the beginning of something that never dies. Sometimes people ask me without words, just with their eyes. They want to know if I regret it, if I would go back, if I would pull the trigger that time, just to spare myself the hell that came after. But that hell didn't come to burn me. It came to mold me. He didn't destroy me. He emptied me. He cleansed me of everything I thought I was, so that something new, something eternal could enter. And that something became everything. Today I understand why the journey demands so much. It's because when the soul decides not to die, it needs to be pushed to the limit. It's not punishment, it's forging. Gold is tested in the fire, and real love, the kind that doesn't give up, that doesn't negotiate, that doesn't betray, is tested in renunciation. I remember one time, hiding in a warehouse in Vidya, watching the news on an old TV with a crackling signal. A religious leader appeared and said that those who betray tradition must disappear. He spoke with such certainty, so coldly, and I knew that, even without naming names, he was talking about me. Not about me exactly, but about everything I represented. I was the stain, the foreign body, the virus they thought needed to be eliminated. But as he spoke, I could only think of the same phrase as always: my shield, my sword, my compass. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And there, in a stuffy corner, surrounded by sacks of rice and the strong smell of dried rosemary, I began to laugh. A solitary but light laugh. I laughed because I realized there was no turning back. They could call me whatever they wanted. They could try to erase me, silence me, isolate me, but I no longer belonged to that system. My citizenship was different, invisible, but irrevocable. After that, I stopped writing for myself. My messages were no longer rants or personal escapes. They were maps, flashlights, keys, little loopholes through which others could escape their own cells, even if those cells were nice apartments with air conditioning and fast internet. Because there are prisons without bars. There are invisible wars. Well-dressed men, with their souls torn to pieces. People smiling on the outside and imploding on the inside. I began to plant hope in unlikely places. Dusty cafes in Bangkok, endless deserts, forgotten libraries in Eastern Europe. I hid verses in open-source software, encrypted audio with a fake accent, left traces in books that no one read any. And each seed carried the same essence, the phrase that brought me back to life when everything in me had already died. Today, I know I'm not alone. I feel it. Sometimes it's subtle, like the way someone frowns when they read a word. Other times, it's obvious. I get a coded message from some country where I have no name, no face, and in it, just one sentence. I was found too, and that's enough for me. That's what feeds me, because this mission was never mine. It was never about me. I'm just a thread in this invisible embroidery, just another voice in a hidden choir, and that's okay. The loom of redemption doesn't need heroes. It just needs willing people, and I am, until my last breath. Because in a world that kills for power, living for love is the most radical revolution there is, and that is the rebellion of IH. People who have never been arrested do not know what true silence is. I am not talking about the silence of the night, nor the silence of an empty church. I speak of that silence that screams, that weighs, that covers your ears and whispers cruelly, "No one will hear you." This silence was my teacher. It was silence that taught me to truly listen. It trained me to notice what almost no one notices, the sound of a heart beating in fear, the contained crack of a tired soul, the weight hidden behind words that come out softly but carry everything that matters. After crossing so many territories, countries that forgot me, cities that gave me temporary names, stations where only the clock reminded me that I existed, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't running away. I was on a mission. Every step, even the most random, was part of a larger path. It was as if an invisible map was being drawn along with me, line by line, gesture by gesture. I didn't see the entire route, but I felt like I wasn't walking alone. The hand holding me wasn't mine, and I learned that not every coordinate needs latitude. Sometimes, the place where we need to be is marked by a call, by an urgency inside our chest, by a fire that pushes us even when we are tired. Along the way, I met others like shattered but alive, women carrying daughters wrapped in threadbare blankets, running from wars that seemed never end, men who could no longer pray but still looked to the sky as if waiting, boys who grew up among shrapnel, who learned early on that Holy Land is not land without blood. It is land where one treads with conscience. Not everyone spoke my language. Not everyone believed in the same God as I did. But to everyone, I gave the same gift. One thing that still belonged to me. A verse. My most precious possession. Sometimes when insomnia overcame me, I would whisper this verse to myself, as if I were cradling, and it was as if the pain itself heard it. As if it became an accomplice, part of the journey, not as an enemy, but as a witness. It was in the south of Italy, in a village that didn't even appear on the map properly, that I met Arnaldo, a former photographer, now a tired man who lived in a cabin near the sea. He didn't ask who I was. He offered me work in exchange for silence, to look after the goats, feed the dogs, clean the beach when the wind was too strong, and I accepted. Months passed before he figured something out. An image on his laptop, which he once lent me to edit, had a hidden code. It was one of my messages. He didn't say anything, but the next morning, there was a note next to my bed, just 4 words. I have scars too. It was like a silent embrace, as if my pain had found an echo. He never asked me for an explanation. He just lit a candle and said, "Let's give thanks." And it was there that I understood another. It wasn't my name that needed to be remembered. It was the fire. Whoever recognized the flame would find the... I spent almost a year on that coast. I learned to fish with my hands. I learned to respect silence. Not as someone who runs away, but as someone who offers. Arnaldo taught me that the world also speaks when it is silent, that the sea answers questions that the city doesn't even know how to ask. I learned to listen with my eyes, to see with my spirit. Every night, we would light a candle facing the sea. We would recite the verse together, not like repeating a mantra, but like driving stakes into the sky. It didn't matter if no one else saw us. To God, we were like lighthouses. But those who carry a true flame cannot remain still. Peace is good, but it does not last when you carry a mission in your chest. One morning, I said goodbye. I didn't say goodbye out loud. I left a letter under a rock. A USB stick was glued to the side. Inside it, the verse translated into 37 languages, and a short but loaded sentence. If this sparked something in you, don't extinguish it. Pass it on. I hit the road again. North. Cold. Hard borders. Even harder hearts. In Warsaw, a policewoman looked at me sternly. I was ready to run, but she just gave me a subtle nod. She let me pass. I will never know if she saw something, if she recognized the flame, if she read something in my eyes, but there was compassion there. And in that moment, compassion was my bridge. I walked through streets where I was nobody, where nobody knew who I was, and that was okay, because I didn't need to be remembered. I needed to sow, And I realized that it's also that sometimes the cold on the outside reveals a warmth on the inside that has not yet dared to be. Was just another shadow walking among thousands, but inside that shadow, a light burned. Was this precisely the fact that no one noticed me strength? I stopped seeking approval. I stopped waiting for someone to tell me I was right or that my path was worthy. I understood that my mission didn't need a stage, only soil, fertile soil. Wherever I went, that was where I wanted to plant. That was all. It was in a forgotten village, in a region that the map barely named, that I found an abandoned church. Plaster falling from the walls, the stained glass windows shattered like interrupted dreams. All that remained was a crooked bench and an empty altar, without a cross, without a symbol, without ornament. I entered not as a devotee, but as someone seeking an echo. I sat down, not to pray, but to remember. There, in that ancient silence, so different from the silence of prison, I felt something more present than ever. There were no voices, but there was presence. With a rusty metal tip I found on the ground, I carved a phrase on the bench, letter by letter. John 15:13. It wasn't pretty. The letters came out shaky, misaligned, but they were alive. It felt like I was tattooing the world with the truth that had set me free. I slept right there, under the old choir stalls, surrounded by dust, ruins, and a sky that came in where the roof couldn't hold it. I dreamed that night of the original, the one they had left under my door in Al-Mansura. But this time, it was made of light, not cellulose. No traces of mold, no folds. It was held by a faceless hand, but I knew the smell, warm bread, and forgiveness. I woke up with snow on my eyelashes. The cold told me it was time to leave again. I went to Berlin, wearing a network technician badge. I spent days installing routers in apartments of people who would never know what I had hidden there. And it wasn't bugs or viruses. It was a seed. I coded the verse directly into the firmware of a public Wi-Fi network. Anyone who connected got a notification. Did you know that someone already gave their life for you? Some ignored it. Others reported it. But one, just one, responded. A simple message, sent to an IP address I had used for less than an hour. It simply said, "Thanks for reminding." That one return was an invisible nourishment that sustained me for weeks. Winter took my health. I lost a tooth. I coughed up blood for days. There were times when I didn't eat, when I didn't hear voices, when I didn't see sunlight. But even then I repeated the verse. Not as a mantra, as a pulse. Sometimes it wasn't even me who said it. It was him who spoke inside me. Even when I didn't understand it properly. Even when faith was just smoke. There was meaning. There was a mission. In Prague, I hid in a shelter for migrants. It was a windowless basement with too much soul. I saw eyes that no longer wanted to see. Mothers who cradled invisible children. Men who shivered without being cold. Children who didn't know how to play, only how to resist. There, I left another seed. I took a coloring book, one of those with exaggerated figures and bright colors. And in the middle of the pages, I wrote the verse. In large but discreet letters, between a balloon drawing and a smiling dog. When I came out, I saw a little girl tear out that page. She folded it carefully and hid it inside her coat. She didn't say anything to me, but she looked at me, and her gaze was like fire. After that, I crossed the sea towards Greece. The waves hit me harder than soldiers. Every meter was a fight. I was almost swallowed. I almost gave up. I bled from the mouth. I lost strength, but I arrived. Still breathing, still planting. Thessaloniki welcomed me with wind and stones, and also with an old blind man who played an instrument I had never heard before, the bawuki. I heard him on street corners, playing for no one. One day, he called me. He offered me tea. I sat down with him. I told him a little about my story, without names, without dates, just the pain. He said almost nothing, but when I finished, he just muttered, "You didn't run away, you were sent." Then, without ceremony, he began to play a melody that sounded like the verse. No words, just notes, just soul. That night, for the first time, I cried without hiding. I cried not out of fear, but out of certainty, because there was music in my testimony. There was harmony in the midst of chaos. And in that place, with a blind man touching hope on worn strings, I understood, even at the end of the world, love finds a way to touch. I've lost count of the countries I've crossed, the names I've used, the faces I've assumed to fool the cameras and mislead the electronic eyes. But there's one thing I've never stopped counting: how many times I've repeated that phrase, that yes is engraved in me, not on paper, not in records, but in my flesh, in the ribs that moved with effort, in the blisters that burst on my feet, in the scars that my soul insists on keeping. Now I'm in a place I don't even know how to name. Maybe it's a port, maybe just a pause before the next crossing. It doesn't matter. What matters is what I have in mind. And it's not an object. It's a network, not of cables or signals. It's a living network, made of voices. People who heard the verse, made it their home, and now carry it like a sacred scar. We don't have badges, we don't have logos, we don't have a headquarters. We have something better: fire. We recognize each other in the heat. We don't need to say anything. Sometimes just a look is enough. The connection is invisible, but it's more real than any password, because what we're living is not just a story. It's inheritance, it's legacy. I remember perfectly the day I touched a complete Bible for the first time. It wasn't in a church, nor at a ceremony. It was at a forgotten station, with no signs. A silent man sat next to me. He observed me for a long time. It seemed like he saw beyond my skin. When he got up, he didn't say anything. He left the book on the bench and disappeared before I could ask him anything. It was an old copy, with a hard cover, worn edges, the smell of time and truth. I picked it up like someone holding a newborn baby. I opened it without choosing. I just opened, and it wasn't by chance. The first sentence that met my eyes was a scentless question. How long, O Lord, shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Shall I cry unto thee violence, and thou wilt not save? Habakkuk 1:2. At that moment, I broke down, because that verse was a photograph of my soul. It was the scream I had swallowed so many times. From the cells, from the hiding places, from the forgotten fields, from the abandoned trails. It was as if there, God had answered, not by saying I am here, but by saying I was there all along, in your own voice. From that moment on, I never stopped. I read every day, not looking for pretty phrases to write on the walls. I read like someone looking for air, like someone digging their own salvation. Sometimes, it hurt more to read than to remember, because the words pierced me. They weren't gentle, they were like scalpel. They showed my pride, my anger, my escape, but at the same time they showed a God who didn't shout command, a God who washed feet, a God who didn't want my performance. He wanted my heart, just the way it was, patched up, discredited, tired. I, who only knew short orders and long threats, found a spirit that whispers, that invites, that waits. That sentence in John 15 was no longer it was the root, but from it a river flowed. A river that washed away fear, cynicism, and theology of control. The parables, the psalms, the prophets, the letters, all of it in a house that I could enter without taking off my shoes. And every page had cracks, and through those cracks, light entered. But it was not the light of the stage. It was not the light of the religious showcase. It was the light of revelation. The light that unmasks without condemning, that exposes in order to heal. One night, I read a verse that silenced me inside. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. Corinthians 1:27. And I understood. It was me. I was this madness, this crooked piece, this erased name. And yet, or precisely because of this, I was chosen to carry something sacred. And then I understood. I was exactly that. The fool, the weak, the outcast, the discarded one, the one no one expected to see standing. But at the same time, I was also the chosen one, not because of merit, not because of strength or wisdom, but because he is good. Because where the world sees trash, he sees hidden gold. I began to save verses like someone sewing a new skin, verse by verse, like living tissue. I created a map inside my mind, an invisible map, mine alone. Each chapter was a way out, each sentence, a tool, not to hurt, but to endure, to keep loving, to keep moving forward when everything screamed for me to stop. I had no temple, no pulpit, no sign, but I had the word, and little by little, the word began to have me too. I remember one afternoon, I found a high place, an old abandoned building, like a tower forgotten by God, and I climbed up alone. From up there, I could see the entire valley, as if the whole world lay before my eyes. I opened my Bible to the Gospel of Mark. I read until I got to the healing of the man with the withered hand. Jesus doesn't just heal, he confronts. He looks into the faces of those who accuse, those who control, those who want the law more than life, and asks, is it right to do good or evil on the Sabbath, to save or to kill? And that pierced me, because it was about me. I, who obeyed cruel orders thinking it was right. I, who hesitated when it was time to betray and lowered my weapon because I saw innocence in someone's eyes. There, in that verse, he confirmed it to me. You did the right thing. And in that instant, something exploded. I screamed. I screamed with everything I had. I screamed that verse that had been my shield for so many years. No one has greater love. And I screamed to the sky, to the wind, to the earth, to the demons, to the angels, to anyone who would listen. But mostly, I screamed to myself. Because in that moment, I was no longer the man who clings to a board in the middle of a storm. I was the one swimming hard toward shore. Weeks of silence followed. Days when I wrote fragments on sheets of paper that the wind could carry away, on walls that no one visited, on stones that might outlast me. The Bible stopped being a book to me. It became a sacred field, full of mines. Mines that, instead of destroying, exploded the truth inside me. Each verse was a small, private apocalypse. A whirlwind that dismantled me and remade me. And one day, I wrote this down on the only object I kept from prison. The Bible didn't save me. It just showed me who could. And between Genesis and Revelation, I found him. Not a concept, not a doctrine, but a presence, a person, a man with bright eyes and dusty feet. Jesus, the Son. No longer a legend, no longer a religion, but someone who came into my wet cell, who found me in my well. I did not become a priest. I did not become a teacher. I did not become a leader of anything. I just survived. I survived to say that I found God not in a pulpit, but on a wall marked with chalk and a silence too thick to bear. And now, every word that comes out of me, every image that carries a hidden code, every line that I spread throughout the world, is not propaganda. It is love. It is a response. It is gratitude. Because someone gave their life for me, and the least I can do is give back, verse by verse, gesture by gesture, word by word. Today, I often walk alone, and I don't know if the next step will be my end or my new beginning, but I no longer walk in fear. Fear lost its power when I realized that my soul already has a shepherd, one who calls me by name, even when I forget who I am. In the Word, I didn't just find relief. I found a truth that undid me and remade me, a truth that burns but heals, a truth that doesn't demand performance from me but delivers. It was not the truth that is imposed by decrees, nor the one that echoes through the loudspeakers of those in power. It was something else, a truth that whispers instead of shouting, that is shed in tears, and reveals itself in weakness. A truth that does not demand, but invites, that does not invade, waits, that does not point a finger, but extends a hand within the heart. When I read Psalm 34:18, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves those who are crushed in spirit," I felt as if, for the first time, someone had described me without filters, without masks, without documents. There I was, broken, beaten, tired, torn apart. And it was in this state that he arrived, not bringing questions, nor warnings, but presence. He arrived like a silent blanket on a cold dawn. This is grace. I did not earn it, I did not deserve it, but I received it. And when I read in Isaiah, "Behold, I am doing a new thing, now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and make rivers in the desert." It seemed that it was not just the prophet speaking, it was God's answer, coming straight from the depths of a dead-end tunnel. He didn't start speaking then. He had always spoken, for centuries, but now he was speaking to me. And yes, I understood. That new thing was what sustained me. It was not made of brilliant miracles or heavenly visions, but of a thirst quenched in the midst of my desert, of a direction in the midst of my chaos. All my pain, all my past, had not been an accident. They were the soil being plowed. I was pruned so that the seed of the Word could find space and strength to grow without being suffocated by the clutches of the system. So today, I keep it, like someone who keeps fire in their bones, not to hide it, but to protect it from to keep it from going out. And when fear tries to creep in, when my hands shake or my voice wavers, I go back. I go back to Psalm 9, the one I repeated softly while others slept with knives under the one that held me invisible while the world wanted me dead. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And that's me, shadow under the shadow, hidden from the eyes of the world, but fully visible to heaven. I continue, not protected by human walls, but shielded by a promise. I don't wear an iron armor, but I carry a word that doesn't require armor, because it is a sword in itself, sharp, living, and accurate. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. That's what David wrote in Psalm 119, and now that's what I live by, because without that light, my feet would have no direction. Everything around me is fog, smoke, confusion. But it doesn't go out, and even without explaining everything to me, it walks with me. Even when I don't understand, it's still there. Today, when I pass by someone sleeping on the floor, surrounded by bags and leftover, or see a mother hiding stale bread in her children's coats, my eyes have changed. I no longer see them as statistics. I see them as brothers, as mirrors, as fields waiting for seeds, because I am no longer a fugitive. Now I am a sower, a planter of verses, a spreader of seeds that do not die with time. And it doesn't matter if they are only found tomorrow or 20 years from now. It doesn't matter if they fall into anonymous hands. The word I carry doesn't age, doesn't expire, doesn't lose its power, and I write it with what I have. Encrypted messages in ordinary images, pieces of text hidden in forgotten files, phrases camouflaged in old forums, short audios with unrecognizable accents. They are notes thrown into the sea, torches thrown into the... Not because I want fame, but because I know someone, somewhere, is looking for a way home, And it's not just me. There are many of us, thousands, maybe millions, people who don't dare say it, but who are tired of pretending, tired of doubting everything, of distrusting everyone, of not feeling truth anywhere. And it is in this abyss that the verse arrives. That verse that was once left under a door for me, and that now I spread like someone who throws lights into the dark sea, hoping that somewhere, someone will see them and come back home. Because that is, in fact, my mission. Not to cause a stir, not to build a name for myself, nor to found a movement with banners. It is to sow the word as if planting a new heart inside another breast, with care, with urgency, with holy because this has never been about me. It is about him. It always has. And when I reread those words of Jesus, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest," I understand that this was not just a nice comfort. It was a shelter, a living rock. It was a direct call, and I answered it because I was on the ground. I was one of the exhausted, one of the nameless, one of those who thought they had been forgotten forever. But I was called, not by campaigns, not by speeches, not by impositions. I was found by a living presence, a word that not only touched me, but rebuilt me from within, as if the pieces were aligned again by invisible fingers. That is why today, when I hide a code inside an image, I do it as if I were writing a prayer on a wall that no one sees. That is what each verse is, a living, silent prayer, thrown into the world like a seed that crosses continents without a passport, until it finds a soul that needs to be set on fire. Because there is no cell capable of containing a verse. There is no lie that can withstand a psalm. No dictatorship can erase a gospel. I know this because I faced all of this, and I am still here, still sowing, still breathing, still burning. And even if they try to hunt me down again, even if they erase my name from the record, even if they go back to calling me just I, this letter, this mark, is no longer a stigma. It is a flag that I carry with honor. It is my origin. It is the seal of one who has been found. And when someone asks me why I have a smile on my face even though I have no possessions, I don't hesitate. I say that I carry with me the only wealth that doesn't rust, a living Bible pulsing inside me, and a God who dares to call me his son, even though the world has called me a traitor, a deserter, a madman. That's the difference between them and him. They wanted me to obey without thinking. God wanted me to be free. They wanted me to be an instrument of a plan. God wanted me to be the heir of a promise. They wanted me to tremble. God wanted me to walk, not because the fear is gone, it's still there, but because now I walk in fear. I walk through it, because faith is not the absence of fear. It's persistence, it's endurance. It's walking even when the ground shakes, even when the sky darkens. It's holding on to the promise like a shield and reciting Psalm 23 like a breath. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And that is enough for me. That is enough. With this certainty I cross deserts, seas, prisons. With this light I invade closed systems, penetrate zones of silence, cross walls and distances. I die 1,000 deaths, but I resurrect them all, because this mission is not made of military secrecy. It is made of holiness. It did not spring from my desire. It sprang from the heart of a God who saw me before I wanted to be seen, who sought me out when my only desire was to disappear, not to escape, but to be forgotten. But he came, silently, without punishment, without accusation. He brought only a wet sheet of paper and a sentence that changed everything. Since that day, I have never stopped looking for his face. I look for him in old pages, in children's voices, on cold nights under the shelterless sky, in every look that pronounces the name of Jesus without realizing that life begins there. Because now, that is what I am. Not a missionary of systems, not an echo of religions, but a living witness of a presence, a real presence, personal, eternal. He doesn't get offended by my doubts. He doesn't turn away from my falls. He doesn't negotiate his love. He doesn't demand masks. He doesn't demand performance. He only asks for an open heart, even if it's broken. And that's what I have. And that is why I continue, even without an address, even without a fixed identity, even without any human guarantee. I continue because he is my guarantee. His word is what anchors me, what guides me, what sustains me. It is my compass when the path disappears. It is my nourishment when everything inside dries up. And even if they silence me, if they take away my voice, if they lock me up again, if only one other soul repeats the verse out loud, I still exist. And that is enough, because I was not sent to be a hero, I was sent to be a witness. And that in itself is already a revolution. I have no temple of stone, but every space where I plant a verse becomes an altar. I have no wooden pulpit, but my own body is a letter, written in blood and spirit. I have no fixed name, but he calls me his, and that is enough for me to continue. Even when everything is dark, I sow. Even without knowing who will reap, I sow. Because I am no longer afraid of silence. Silence no longer frightens me, because I have discovered that sometimes God speaks louder within it than in the thunder. I learned this one gray morning, on a soaking wet rooftop, with my clothes stuck to my body and my soul torn apart. I recited Psalm 27 with my throat dry, almost torn, and in that moment I felt my prayer piercing the sky like an arrow. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? Those words sank into me like roots. Then I understood that my enemy was never the system, nor the agents, nor the walls. My real enemy was fear, and he, with his light, undid it. In that moment, I realized that I no longer needed to run like a fugitive, that I could walk, even without a map, because I was no longer alone. It didn't matter where my feet were going. I knew who they were going with, and that changes everything, because running away is desperation, but being sent is a mission, and I was sent, even before I knew it. But now I know, like Isaiah 6:8, here am I, send me. And even though no one had ever asked me that question out loud, my soul responded with everything I am. Because there are calls that do not ring in the ears, they ring in the wounds. They are felt in the bent backs of those who have fallen 1,000 times. They are felt in the eyes that can no longer dream. They are felt in the blood of those who believed they were worthless, until they discovered that someone had shed their own blood for them. It was at that moment that I understood the cross, not as a religious symbol, but as a gesture of surrender, a living, eternal, unconditional gesture. When I read, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," I understood that I was there, among those who knew not, among those who obeyed out of fear, among those who kept silent in order to survive, among those who hurt because it was easier than. And yet, I was forgiven, not after I changed, but while I was still the same, while I was still rebelling, still hurting, still running away. And that kind of forgiveness cannot be forgotten. It disarms. It transforms everything. After that, you no longer look at the world with the same eyes. You no longer see other people's pain as something distant. You don't walk past a broken face without recognizing it, because that face was once yours too. You begin to see each person as a mirror of the sky that you haven't yet understood shine. And even if that person never says a word, even if they can't even read, you see in them the possibility of. Because if a single sheet of paper, wet and left under a door, rescued me from the darkness, what cannot the living word do when it falls into a heart that is even slightly open? What cannot sprout there if such a small seed has already done so much for me? That is why I don't get tired. That is why I continue. That is why, even when my knees hurt or my voice fails, I continue to sow. And when people ask me what I live on, I answer without hesitation. Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. As the Master said, back in the desert, I know this desert well. I have walked in it, suffered in it, cried in it, but I have also seen it flourish. Because where there is word, there is life. And now, when I read John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, my hands shake. I know that that word was not just a text, it was a person. It was Christ walking among us, eating the dust of the earth, weeping for, carrying the cross that was ours. And when you understand that, you can no longer keep silent. Even if I don't have a microphone or a church, even if I'm alone in a cold cave, this truth burns inside me like fire in my bones. As Jeremiah said, I will remember him, nor speak in his name. But there was a burning fire inside me, locked in my bones. I tried to resist. I tried to keep quiet, but I couldn't, because this is me, a modern-day Jeremiah, without a temple, without a pulpit, with my bones burning. It doesn't matter if they understand me or believe me. What matters is that I can't keep quiet. Not after everything I've seen, not after being pulled out of the well, not after being loved without asking for anything in return, not after being called by name, even when the world erased me. Now I don't want titles, I don't want permissions. I just need air to keep sowing. And if one day my fingers get tired, if they cut my tongue, I know that others will come, because I am not alone. We are many, a network without a name, a body without a face, a church without walls, people who have found God in the Word and have decided not to keep it to themselves. And even if they silence us, even if they try to silence our voice, we will because this is not a human revolution. It is a quiet rebirth. It is an awakening of the spirit among the forgotten. It is the restoration of the exiled. We, the IH, the nameless, the homeless, the voiceless, are part of this story. Not for applause, but so that he may be seen, so that he may be known, so that in every corner marked by pain, there may be an echo that says, he was here, he was with me, he saved me. And that echo is my legacy, my life. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, as if something invisible is calling me, as if there is an urgency that cannot be put into words. I get up, grab my Bible, open it wherever I am, and I always find an answer. Sometimes I don't understand it well. Sometimes it's a phrase that seems distant, that doesn't seem meant for me. But if I keep it in my heart and let it do its work, it starts to shake things up like a stone falling into water and breaking the surface. That's what the word does when it really gets into me. It doesn't stay in my head. It goes all the way to the bone, to the past, to the fear, to the pride. And it starts to dismantle everything, not with violence, but with love, with truth, with presence, with the tenderness that only a father has when he sees his child hurt. So when I read Psalm 139 and see that it says, "Before a word is even in my mouth, O Lord, you know it completely," I stand still, because I don't need to disguise myself before him. I don't need to explain my past, nor justify my mistakes. He already knows everything, and yet he calls me, covers me, loves me. And that truth, that one truth, sustains me when everything else falls apart. When the city ignores me, when my messages go unanswered, when I stand alone before a damp wall written in charcoal, and all I have left is a verse. Sometimes that's all I have, a verse. But that verse is worth more than all the gold in the world, because it saved me. It spoke to me when no one else would. And now it's my way of speaking. I don't need to shout, because words don't need volume. They need space, fertile soil, open hearts. And they exist. They are in prisons, in hospital, in shelters, in the disconnected phones of children who no longer believe in anything. They are there, waiting for someone to tell them that there is still a truth that does not betray, a love that does not change, a God who does not abandon. And I'm here for it, not because I'm special, but because I've been touched. When someone is struck by true love, they can no longer live as if nothing had happened. They must give it, transmit it, become a bridge. Even if they are invisible, even if no one knows their name, even if no one thanks them, even if they erase them from the lists, even if they reject them at the gates, they know that they are sowing the seeds of eternity. And this is incomparable, because everything else passes. Fear, persecution, the flesh that weakens, the mind that tires. But the word remains. As Isaiah 48 says, "The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever." This is my refuge, my home, not a country, not a flag, not a letter. It is the permanence that does not break, the rock that does not move, the voice that does not fall silent. So when I walk through the cities, not knowing if I am being followed or watched, I look up and say, "My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth." Psalm 121. I do not trust in my strength. I trust in his faithfulness, and it is enough. It fills, it drives. When people ask me why I keep going, even in the darkness, I answer that the light doesn't need permission to shine, that a spark is enough to break through the night, that a verse is enough to break through a cell. And if that verse is in you, you are no longer a prisoner. That's why I keep leaving fragments in the most unexpected places, on clothing tags, on forgotten memory cards, in seemingly corrupted file name. And those who have eyes to see will see. Those who have ears to hear will hear. For this is not just word, it is spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. As 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." I live like this, even without documents, without a home, without a defined future, because I have true freedom, the kind that does not depend on governments, nor on the economy, nor on signatures. It is simply believed, received, lived. And if anyone is reading this right now, if there is another broken soul on the other side who doesn't know how to go on, I say this to them: no matter how deep you've fallen, no matter how many names have been erased from you, no matter how many times you have failed, he still sees you. He still loves you. He's not expecting you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to invite him in, and when he comes in, everything changes. I say this: I who was dust, who was undone, who was silence, and now I am a witness. Not because I deserve it, but because he made me. He gave me a new identity. And even if the world doesn't recognize it, I live, I defend, I proclaim. As long as I have breath, as long as I have blood, as long as I have a finger to write, I will continue sowing, because someone gave his life for me, and I don't intend to keep that truth to myself. This truth is the only thing worth repeating. Yes,